Welcome back to another edition of Sami Says. This is Almas Jamil Sami. I have an old mentor here. Well, he's not old. The relationship is old. It's been a minute or two since we met each other.
All right.
This is, everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs somebody that they can always go to, turn to, look to. And Brother Derrick Williams is certainly one of the people I've always looked. Way back in the early days when I first met you, I think the first time I met you was in your office. We were talking about my first book, The Unshackled Mind.
That's right.
And I remember how you inspired me to continue on at that moment. So I'd like to welcome our audience to my mentor, one of my mentors, one of the people that I look up to, Brother Derrick Williams. That's here in San Antonio by way of Pittsburgh.
By way of Pittsburgh, that's right.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Sam. It's my pleasure to be here, my brother. And my home is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I think it's appropriate to let you know I got here to San Antonio by way of the military.
Okay.
And that's how a lot of us got to where we got, by way of the military. Matter of fact, if it were not for the military, I might still be in Pittsburgh or not be here at all. It was an opportunity for me to go forth, to move out of my immediate surroundings, and the military provided that. It also provided my first initial training about the global world, because it allowed me to leave Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the north side, south side, Manchester, and to venture out. And until that happened, in many regards, you end up defining reality from your neighborhood, from the city. And while I may have gone places like to Chicago and Cleveland as a child, for the most part I defined the world by what was immediate around me, and the military provided that platform for me.
It always amazes me when I meet people. And I'm from Clinton, Oklahoma, small town, country boy. Actually, I was on a farm first. And I meet people from these big, big cities, and come to find out that many of them never really had experience beyond a 20-block radius.
You're right. You're so right. Because space is in fact relative. It's like having a vehicle that can go 160 miles an hour. But if you never get beyond 30 miles, you have a vehicle that goes 30 miles an hour. It has a potential. And it was pretty much the same in terms of where I came up at. You defined it, your immediate surroundings. So that's a relative thing that I think is very important, because sometimes when we meet people and we ask them where are they from, where are you from, and they tell you Pittsburgh or New York, well, wow, this big city. But you forget the cities are made up of neighborhoods and sections.
Yes.
And some people spend a lifetime in the neighborhood. Some people spend a lifetime in one house. Okay. Yeah. And while I moved around a lot in Pittsburgh, and for a reason, it was me and my mother. My mother was blind. Okay. And so I had a very unique relationship growing up with an unsighted woman. She would say, I can see well as y'all who's blind. But I mention that because she was key in my life, because she taught me so much through a different set of lenses. She taught me to listen. She taught me to feel. She taught me to think at a level that most sighted people would not think twice about.
How did she teach something like that?
Oh my goodness.
You had to be extremely sensitive.
It's amazing. She had 4 children, and she never seen any of us. Okay, wow. And so she raised all of us through feel and touch. And
was she born blind?
No, she went blind at 16. So she had memories in her mind.
Okay. Okay,
and I guess that gave her. And she never saw complete darkness. Okay, she saw light. She had a retinitis pigmentosus, was an eye disease, but she always saw light, which gave her some degree of comfort. And but I mention those two essentials because where you're from, where you stay, your surroundings, and those people that were closest to you during the very early years of your life were in fact your mentors, because of the imprinting that took place. And so she imprinted herself firmly in me. And even today, while she's been gone for a number of years, 1997, so much of her imprinting still impacts on my life today. And even with my most recent venture, I say recent, I guess the past 13 years, my involvement in purchasing real estate, investing in houses, and what that has done for me. Not so much the investing in houses, but the investing in lives, the people that come in my life as a result of me being a landlord.
Huh.
And
Did you anticipate that when you got into this business?
No.
You was just trying to make money?
Yeah, that was the initial. I was trying to be forward thinking. I'd gotten out of the military. I had my business in San Antonio, Texas as a human resource development specialist. I taught race relations and diversity training, conflict mediation, plan renegotiation, all those things that help people do things better, sort of a performance enhancement specialist, and involved in the community. But certainly that was not my intention. My intention was to put a little money away, buy some property, have a secondary income. But boy, was it a surprise, because I found that was just a very small part of this proposition, a very small part indeed. There's no question about it.
You started out buying one house, two houses, a block of houses. How did you start out?
Well, actually, it was a package deal. I had a friend, a broker who approached me. The fellow I had purchased my home from. He knew a little bit about me, my personal side of me, and he had heard me talk about wanting to make a little investment here or there. I didn't have a lot of money. As a matter of fact, I didn't have any money. That was the unique thing about it, because he would tell me, you don't want to use your money anyway. You want to use someone else's money. In other words, get a loan, get a bank loan.
So was it kind of like this Carlton Sheets? You know, remember that program on television, the Carlton Sheets?
Yeah. I guess I became familiar with Carlton Sheets a little later on. But when this gentleman approached me, he told me that he had a prospective seller who had gotten himself into some trouble and was trying to get rid of quite a few pieces of property. And so he came to me and said, hey, if I could put together a deal and maybe find a lender, would you be interested in buying a cluster of houses? And I said, sure. Yeah, as long as it's not my money, you know. And I didn't know much about it, and so I was relying on him to guide and give me the financial mentoring and show me how to do this. And he went out and found some financiers. The interest rate was kind of high, okay, but he also proved the point that it's not so much the high interest rate. You want to get the property, and then later on you can see about refinancing it or whatever.
Okay.
And his idea was for me to look at multiple houses, multiple dwellings, like duplexes and fourplexes, where the rent from one could literally pay the note on the house. It was due each month. So he was able to show me that even though the interest rate was a little inordinately high, that don't get caught up on that. Because make the investment in the property, have multiple dwelling, and let one part of that dwelling finance or service your loan. And so that's what convinced me, hey, that's not a bad deal. And so I signed my life away, you know, and I believe the initial purchase was about 32, maybe about 20-something units. Okay.
Really? Yeah. Right off the bat?
Right off the bat. And then...
so it was an apartment building?
No, these were like duplexes. And then the fellow that I was purchasing them from, I discovered that he had a few others. He had some single houses, some 2 bedrooms, some 3 bedrooms. And I said, well, I did it with duplexes, let me do it with these single houses. And so I purchased those as well. And then he came to me again and said, I have an apartment building, would you be interested in that? And I said, can I do the same thing? And he said, yeah. So I went ahead and did it with the apartment building. And before you knew it, you know, I had, and then I did a few on my own. I saw how that was done. Mm-hmm. And the fear factor was gone. And so I went ahead and purchased the apartment building. And I purchased a couple of other houses on my own. I brokered the deal and did a pretty good deal because I did them at no interest. And so even when I share with people, they say, "What? You bought a house without having to pay interest?" Well, I had a motivated seller, okay, and we were able to write that up. So here I am, the owner of a number of houses. Didn't know anything about maintenance. I had some skills because in the service at one time I was a mechanic, an aircraft mechanic, so I had some basic skills. But I guess the greatest attribute was my wife. She was from Mobile, Alabama. I got a Southern girl, and her daddy was a carpenter. And she used to ask questions. And so I tell folk a lot of what I know, the basic knowledge, I got from my wife. I mean, brothers behind every brother is a sister, and that's true. At least it was true in my particular circumstances. And so I, at the time when I had these properties, I also had a business as a consultant trainer. And that business as a consultant trainer came out of me not being able to get a job. It seems that everything I've done has come out of me being denied the opportunity to show what talents or whatever I had. When I retired from the military, I went back to school. I had my little degree before I got out of the military, and then I went to work at for the federal government. And I stayed with the federal government for about 11 months, and then I resigned from the federal government.
Because?
Well,
anything you'd like to talk about?
I think it was a combination of things. While I was in the military, I spent a great deal of my time, almost about 14, 15 years, as a race relations specialist, as an equal opportunity specialist, as a human relations trainer. And so I dealt with a lot of what people call touchy-feely issues, which I call core issues. Core issues that were not only extremely important for the military, but important for our society at large. And so that's where my training lied. I had worked at the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, which is the old Defense Race Relations Institute, which is renowned, one of the only institutions that is dedicated exclusively to race, and it was controlled by the Department of Defense. And so I was affiliated with that for a number of years. I was on the staff, and then at various bases in the military during some tumultuous times, the Travis race ride in Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco, race rides all over, came through the military during the 60s and 70s. And so those are some tremendous years. And the military truly led the way for a lot of the peaceful negotiations that we see in terms of policies and addressing racism and discrimination. And so that was my background. I'll cut through the chase. That was my background, and I had spent a great deal of time on special assignments, designing courses, advanced courses in race relations and human relations, and sent different places through headquarters. And so when I got out of the service, I had that background, and it's very difficult to deny it because it was on my vitae, on my resume. And when I would go to apply for a job, while I had managerial skills and, quote, leadership skills and whatever an organization or a corporate America was requesting, they would see my proclivity in the area of justice and race relations and human relations. And to be quite frank with you, they didn't want to be affiliated.
You were considered a troublemaker? Potential troublemaker?
Yes. This is a potential troublemaker. And people have a lot of stereotypes about brothers, and we have stereotypes about each other. But we know the dominant ones that exist. We've heard of the glass ceilings and the issues of African American men being hired on by corporate America and ending up in, staff position and not line positions. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I spoke my mind as well. I'm not saying that I was a bull in a china shop. Which we got to correct that too. By the way, they've done some studies. They released a bull in the china shop, and the bull didn't knock over a single thing. So, but the bottom line is that I was not the investment material that many Caucasian-controlled organizations wanted to be affiliated with. And so some of the simplest jobs I was getting denied, okay? And I knew I was more than qualified. And so when I took on this job in the Department, not Department of Defense, but the Civil Service as a management analyst, I was there for, I guess 8-9 months when one day I had to stay to do some work. And I was in a large part of the facility that didn't have rooms, but they had partitions.
Right.
And so during the day, all you heard was hum, 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 people talking. You really couldn't distinguish who was who because we were all in this big open space together. But in the evening, of course, when there was a handful of folk, the air was very critical in hearing what was going on. And one day I had to stay and finish a report. And while I was finishing the report, some of the heads of departments had a meeting. And it was right next to my petition. And while I was doing the report quietly, they were holding and conducting their business. And there was a black woman who had been hired on as a department head, and she had beat out a number of other people, and they didn't like that. And they were discussing her promotion to the position. And basically the bottom line was that she got the position, but she won't survive because she won't get the support that she thinks she's going to get from us.
Wow. And
I have an allergy, and sometimes I sneeze at most unsuspecting time. And I sneezed, or coughed, or whatever it was, and silence fell over the whole work area. And I heard someone say, "Is someone over there?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Is that you, Mr. Williams?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And the question was asked, "Well, how long have you been there?" And my response was, "Long enough." Okay. And I knew at that point, Sami, that I would not survive that environment. Okay. I guess the thing for me to have done was, no, boss, I didn't hear a thing, but I didn't. And it was at that point that I made a decision to resign from the Civil Service. Didn't have a job. Didn't have anything.
So it took you, what, 3 months to go ahead and let it go from that meeting, which was about 8 months?
Yes. People trying to convince me. People don't retire from civil service, man. I said, watch me. And so I went back to advanced study school. I went to get an advanced degree because I realized I wasn't going to make it out there without some extra things in my bag. And so I went and finished a master's degree because my plan was to hang my own shingle.
Right.
And to employ myself.
Okay.
And to look at the skills and the talent that the Creator had endowed me with. And so I didn't have any other place to turn. Okay. And that's when I took up photography, videography, and all the other skills that I thought would be self-directed. And that's how I took care of my family. And then so fast forward.
But did you take courses on videography and things like that? You just started?
No, I bought books.
All self-taught?
Books, videos, all self-taught. You know, as a matter of fact, the first photography job I ever had, a good photography job, I made $7,000. And people say, how did you do that? And I don't normally share this kind of information, but I'm sharing it with you because I think it's important for people to recognize that we have within ourselves the capability of doing much more than we can even imagine.
Right.
And I had a mentor, a gentleman by the name of Eugene Coleman, who was the owner of a newspaper, black newspaper called The Snap, here in San Antonio.
Yes.
And he was a photography expert. And he had taught me some of the essentials of photography. I had always been interested in photography, but he taught me how to take pictures of black folk, which is an art in itself. And what I'm saying is essentially to make sure that our photography is comparative to anyone else's, okay? And that's all about lighting. You and I had a discussion recently about that.
Yes.
And so I got into taking pictures, group pictures. And there was a group here in San Antonio called the Prometheans. retired military people from World War II, and they had come together, and there were 500 of them, and they had brought their wives, about 250 wives. It was about 750, 800 people, black folk, who attended this conference. And I was hired on to take one picture. A picture of the men together, and the picture of the wives together, and actually three, and a picture of the men and wives together. And I sold that photo for a price, actually $10. And when you add up the numbers, everyone wanted a copy. And so in about 15 minutes, I went away with more than I had made on my job. Yeah. But that was an awakening for me. You talk about the ancestors nudging you and letting you know that there's something out there for you. You know, and don't ever convince yourself that you can't. First of all, you got to establish that you can, and then find out, what is it that I do well? What is it that's in need? And so that was a reinforcement for me, and also it convinced me that I could. I began to develop a certain confidence in my own innate skills and talents. And I say my own, those things that others had given me. I give reference to all that teach, okay? But after I combined that together, it gave me the kind of confidence to move on. And that's how I ended up opening up my own consulting and training business after I got my advanced degree. And I began to feed myself and pay my bills and take care of my family through my own effort. And that's how the real estate business came about. Real estate entrepreneurship. Okay, I'm not a realtor. Okay, I'm a real estate entrepreneur. Okay, and I saw it as an opportunity to take care of the future. And that's how I got involved in the real estate entrepreneurial side of the business.
So it was through your initial failure, trying to toe the line.
Right, absolutely.
In civil service.
Yes, yes.
That led to your being on paper, I'm sure, a millionaire today.
Well, and let me say this, you know, funds and monies, you know, it's what you do with it, okay? And probably much of what I'd like to call successful is my successful life plan for the future. I think my children and grandchildren will benefit more than I will, because I still am paying for a lot of my properties. You know, I haven't paid them all off yet. But I did recognize that it was an opportunity to build. You can call it wealth building, you can call it secure building for the future, you can call it whatever you want. But the important thing is that you're doing the building, and you're to a large extent controlling the assets of that building process. And something creatively majestic comes out of that. And you began to look around and feel like, you know, I'm in control of my destiny. I can make some decisions without being bashful or think that if I speak my mind, I'm going to be punished, which is one of the essential problems that I think that exists in our country today, that when our paychecks are attached to someone or something, also as attached as our allegiance to that thing. And so we find ourselves living sort of a double life. We think one thing, we say something else, because we don't want to threaten our livelihood. And that's one of the things I began to sense, that, hey, I became more bold because I could say what was on my mind and didn't have to worry about, you don't have a problem with that, do you, Mr. Williams? Okay.
Political correctness.
That's right. That's right. And that's why I think it's so essential for us to be involved in our own businesses, to pursue our own interests. And that's where the housing aspect of my interest came in.
What surprised you? I have been affiliated with people who were landlords, people who are tenants, who have trouble with landlords, people who are landlords who have trouble with tenants. I've seen it all. I've been on both sides of that spectrum, you know. And my question is, what surprises you most about what you have learned as a result of your position of authority? Because it is a position of authority. And with that come responsibilities.
Wow. Excuse my contemplative moment. It's just that I've learned so much. First of all, let me say that the title landlord is this European title, landlord, lord, the gentry class. I'm far from that, but I guess the reality is that I am in a position of authority because I can determine the destiny to some degree. You know, I can evict you. I can call the police. There's a lot of things that I can do depending on what's going on. And I soon recognized that having the authority, it's like when I was in the military. Okay, I'm a retired senior master sergeant. Okay, and that looks very impressive on the arm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and people, especially people not familiar with the military, they count the stripes, and I didn't have to say I'm a senior master sergeant. You could see the stripes on me that I had a certain military authority. Okay, well, as a landlord, I don't have to go around saying I'm the landlord. You know that I own the property. Okay, and the first thing that I came in touch with was that the definition of landlord, as I thought it to be, you know, collecting the rent, keeping the contractual relationship, was far from reality, at least for me. And I think in large part because of who I am and how I grew up, and that blind woman that I talked about, us moving from house to house. And you know, those things are still with me. And so as I began to occupy this position of landlord, I began to observe and be reminded that these people come from the same place I came from. They are faced with the same issues and problems my mother was faced with. And so I had this duality. On one hand, I had to collect the rent, and I still do. But how do you balance this? How do you balance a mother coming to you and saying, I didn't get child support this month, so I'm short $100, $200. Or, Mr. Williams, I know I owe you this, but my electricity bill costs almost as much as you know, as my note or as her rent. You know, how do you mediate this? How do you mediate this? Well, the landlord, you know, if strictly in the sense of speaking, our contract is you pay me on a monthly basis. You give me my money, you don't have the money, I'm sorry, you have to move on. It's a business. Mm-hmm. Okay? But it's not that simple. Businesses come from some place. There's a need, and then we provide a service. And I found that whether or not I wanted to accept the reality of it or not, because of my background, and I've shared some of that with you, I sometimes had to make some very difficult decisions. And these people were often part of my group. Okay, and
part of your group.
Yes, what I'm saying is the challenges that I've had as a young man growing up with poverty. The story I told you about my mother moving from place to place. Sometimes she didn't have the money. You know, they were part of my memory coil. Okay, many of our brothers and sisters, and I have a very diverse group of renters. Okay, but most of them are black, like us, like me. And I began to see issues. You know, the military takes you away from the neighborhood, and then you do 20 years someplace. Well, these houses offered me an opportunity to come back home.
Wow.
I came back to that which I had left many, many years ago. Okay. Wow. And I began to see the problems that I had experienced as a young man, or at least my parents. Okay. And so there's always this challenge, this challenge in balancing that out. Am I the landlord today, or am I the consultant to on family relationships? I'm also a drug and alcohol specialist, and I see a lot of abuse of substances, and often my tenants are involved in alcohol abuse, drug abuse. And many of them are involved for reasons that, for them, it's justifiable. Okay, the loss of a job. My husband's going, I got 3 kids here. I don't have anyone to talk to. So I see all of the causations began to come into play. And so one of the biggest challenges for me is, when do I strictly don the uniform of being a landlord? And when do I don the role of being a surrogate father? Or a social worker? Some of my colleagues say, man, you're not a social worker. Well, you can call it what you want. I'm human. Okay? And so because of my own interpersonal sensitivity, sometimes it's very difficult to fulfill this role as strictly a landlord. Landlord. Lord of the land. This authority figure, either you pay or you hit the door. Let the door hit you where the light don't shine and all that.
Well, how do you decide who's conning you and who really needs help?
Well, it's you utilize the knowledge that you have about human beings and about life. Sometimes you have hits and sometimes you have misses. Okay.
Well, you do run across that, though.
Oh, I run across it all the time. Run across it all the time. I've ran across violent situations. I've had homicides. I've had drive-bys. I've had fires. I've had at least 5 or 6 major fires. Fortunately, no one lost their life. But these are the issues in the life of the landlord.
Have you ever felt like you were personally threatened?
Absolutely. Been threatened.
By someone who refused to pay the rent or couldn't pay the rent or didn't pay the rent?
Absolutely. I've had people ask me, well, why would you want to be involved in any kind of occupation that brings a certain danger into your life? Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So making it to the store sometime was a life-threatening venture. But I guess my caution is the divisional factor of landlord-tenant. We all have problems in our lives, and how we mediate and resolve those problems is largely contingent upon who comes into our lives to help resolve those. And while I certainly don't want to see myself as some messianic messenger, okay, the reality is that my life experience causes me to see beyond, at least search beyond the mere fact that you don't have your rent this month, okay? And I have had many opportunities to sit down with people and to not only help guide them in seeing the responsibility of reprioritizing the issues in their lives, but the opportunity has also been afforded to me to make some proper interventions. I've helped save some lives by getting people to go and check on a bump on them, a tumor that's growing. I've gotten many brothers and sisters into drug and alcohol intervention, treatment. I guess you can say I'm an active landlord, and I take on the social responsibility and obligation of being a landlord as well as being the collector of the monthly income.
Did you hesitate to become the social activist within the framework of being a landlord, or is that something that just drew you in? Did you contemplate doing that when you got into the business, or did you just look and say, here's a need beyond providing shelter?
No, I didn't contemplate that. But I guess who I am began to surface beyond. When you're sitting down, you're counting and saying, well, I'm short here, I'm short there, and you have some decisions that you have to make. Evict, not evict. And you begin to ask questions as to why don't you have your rent? And sometimes there were some very legitimate explanations as to why people don't have their rent, okay? And one of the things that I have tried to do is to keep rent at a moderate rate. A lot of my partners often ask me, why are you renting that out for that amount? You can get an extra $200 or $300. And my response is, because many of the people in this neighborhood can't afford an extra $200 or $300, you know. And I've been told, well, you know, you're not going to make it as a landlord because you're not focusing on the monetary aspect and you're spending too much time on the human aspect. And that's not your job. Well, whose job is it? I understand because I am a businessman, but I tried to be the strict advocate of either you have it or you have to go. And I'm not suggesting that I can't make proper decisions when someone needs to move on, okay? But I'm saying it's a lot more complicated because you do become intertwined in people's lives. I remember a shooting that I had in one of my units. The young man that did the shooting was the brother of the sister that lived in the quarters. And he had a drug problem, and he had requested some money from her, and she denied him. And he kind of freaked out. And he came back with an AK-47. And he shot the house up. And she was in there with her children. And she got behind the tub, and while he shot the house up, and he drove down the street, still wild, and unfortunately he shot a bystander. It was a nun in the neighborhood. And so these are heart-wrenching situations, and these are stories that you don't normally routinely hear because most landlords are not involved in that capacity, you know. And I guess what I'm suggesting is that I am who I am. And what went into making Derrick Williams is unique to my context. And
Well, how do you process something like that? I mean, you know, would you just go back and fill in the holes and you know, and comfort? What, you know, how do you process something like that and go back home and go to sleep?
Well, I sleep well, first of all, because I let the dictates of my conscience sometimes determine what is right and what is wrong. I guess what I'm saying is people would say, well, you know, you can't have these two things coincide together. You're being a landlord and also trying to help folk. Well, I suggest that you can, and that the wrenching, the wrestling that I have with certain issues is part of my allegiance to life. I think all of us should be wrestling with moral questions in our lives, and if there's a money component involved there, it's just like my decision to leave the government. I knew that I could have made a lot of money as a government employee, but I also knew that in order to do that, I had to keep my mouth shut and not speak up and speak out to the wrongs and injustices that I saw in the workplace. And the core of who I was and who I had been trained to do dictated that I do that. And so it's a mediation process. It is. I would like to say I've not lost any of my properties. I am current on paying my notes. So there's something there. But I think that the social obligation that we have in our lives should extend into any occupational area that we have. To what extent, that becomes the balancing act that all of us have to walk and take.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm saying, for instance, let's talk about a company that is in the neighborhood that produces, is a canning, say for Coca-Cola. Okay, well, say in the midst of its location, there's poverty, there's drug abuse, there's environmental dangers. I feel that we have an obligation to use whatever resources that we have to go beyond the mere manufacturing or dispensing aspect of having a job or a business. That we all have social obligations. We all have social responsibilities. And while I can't be both in the strict sense of the definition, a landlord and a social worker, I can become aware with social skills as when certain problems emerge in the lives of my tenants, and to recognize that for many of them, I am the object of authority. I am the only one that will speak out or point out certain inconsistencies to them or need for them to get help. And so I take that role very, very, very serious. That if I see something that is impinging upon their survival, that I have a responsibility to point that out. I've gotten some people jobs. I've helped some people see the importance of cleaning their home, cleaning their yard, keeping so the rodents won't come in and infest their children. But how do you learn that? Many of my tenants are young people. We have a lot of young people having children. And they don't have any of the fundamental parenting skills that are so essential. And yet they have to live. So who becomes the director? Who becomes the suggester? I'm saying that the landlord is in an ideal position to do that. And I've recognized that position. And I do the best I can.
Do you feel like you've been placed in the lives of certain people?
I didn't initially. I do now. I'm 13, 14 years older. I returned back to the hood. I brought with me a lot of those organizational skills and things that I learned that were intended to last and to advance me in corporate organizations. And I found that those skills can be applied anywhere. Okay, you know, human relations is something that we should all learn. Effective listening is something that we need in our personal relationships, in our homes, whether or not you're dealing with your children, your wives. Monetary management, whether or not you have 3 ears of corn or $300,000, it always requires a certain amount of management. And so today, as I walk amongst my tenants, as I interact with them, I do see many opportunities to have a positive impact on someone, whether or not it's me arriving 15 minutes early and seeing one of the children out in the street endangering themselves on the curb, and me taking that child and taking them to one of my tenants and saying, your baby is about to get hit, and it's your responsibility. I mean, those opportunities are all around us, and I'm just suggesting that the opportunity presented as a landlord is just another platform for us to interact and to some degree be our brother's keeper, to leave the neighborhood better than it was before we got there. There are some principles, and I've incorporated those principles in my life as a landlord. I don't reject them anymore. I realize that all things will not be resolved, but I do sleep well. I do sleep well because I know that I'm following certain principles of being accountable and being responsible for my brother and sister.
That notion, does that come from your being an African-centered person? What does it mean to be African-centered, and how does it play itself out in your role as landlord?
Well, I think it does to some extent. I think a large degree of what's coming out in me was planted as a young man with my mother. As I said to you, it was very difficult for she and I at times because it was only my mother and I, and moving from house to house, not having sufficient funds, having to be creative in our survival modality. She taught me to be compassionate. I remember I used to get mad if someone was looking or staring at her, and I would say, "What are you staring at her for?" And she would calm me down and say, "Baby, maybe the reason why they're staring at us because they're admiring you and I together, how we maneuver ourselves through town and
Wow.
my hand." And so she taught me to always see the positive side as well. And I'm not a fool, okay, and I'm quite a warrior when I need to be one. But I also know what weapon to choose. And I'm suggesting that, yes, my African-centeredness or my ability to recognize that I come from one of the oldest historical group of people that walk the face of this earth. And what we achieved in ancient Africa and in Africa in general was part of that being the representative group, having worked out, finding out that we don't always have to war to resolve a problem. I think there's a combination of a number of things that are going into shaping me who I am. Certainly my African-centered studies and recognizing that our people are in dire need of help and leadership.
What does African-centeredness mean to you? Does it mean that you studied your African history? How does that reflect in your life? So what is what I hear?
Well, it's a combination of things. You know, whether it be the principles of Ma'at,
Ma'at meaning
the ultimate God of our choice of Africa, the Ma'atan theories of love, joy, and kindness, and those principles that were part of our African heritage. When you study the Egyptian history, when you look at the hieroglyphs, when you look at the book of the coming forth by day and night, you see that we represent and come from a unique people. I mean, while it has been used as a weakness because of our love and affection towards other people, it can also be a strength as well. But remember, every strength is a weakness and every weakness is a strength. Things must be done in moderation. If you look at the world only through a European-centered philosophy, you see the state of the world. You see the component of greed, of colonization, of slavery, of all of those things that we did not represent. And I think there's a suggestion there. There's a suggestion that somehow the oldest people on the face of the earth worked through some issues. And I think there's a reemergence of that awareness. And how do you get it? You get it through the study of who am I, realizing that there are alternative choices, and never letting the component of love and affection and leaving the community in a better shape than it was before you got there. I think those are principles that if you incorporate them into your life, you'll see 1,000,000 to 1 opportunities every day of your life to implement those.
so the things you do for your tenants on their behalf, the genuine love and care that you show them, stems from
They definitely are.
not only your mother, but also your understanding of your African-centered roots.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it gives me, I have a totality of completeness often, even in the worst of circumstances. The most recent one, and I'll just give this as a transition to bringing some closure, is a gentleman that I had rescued from one of my homes. He was unable to pay his rent because he was in a bad relationship with a landlord that had subleased from me. And I discovered that she was, in fact, his drug supplier. And so when he would get his check, whatever drug she had sold him throughout the month, she was selling those drugs at 2 times the cost. So if his check was $800, he would often, he bought $400 worth of whatever, she would take his whole check. And so she was abusing these tenants. And I took him and put him in a different location and attempted to get him some help and get him into treatment. And he recently had a bout with, I'm very careful in sharing too much information.
Sure.
Because he's still in the process of trying to rehabilitate himself. But he got some poison in some crack that had been sold to him. And as a result, he went to a coma. And they were going to pull the plug on him. And they were asking me for my advice and my opinion. And I was suggesting that life is not over until it's over. And to wait, don't be too quick. And he came out of that coma.
Wow.
And he needs some special help right now. And I've become, I guess, one of the key and principal persons in trying to help him rehabilitate because of my relationship with him over the years. I know him, and probably better than some of his relatives know him. And so I availed myself to help in that rehabilitative process. Well, I didn't have to do that as a landlord. I said, hey, you know, I warned the guy, he did it, but I also recognized that I was essential perhaps to the healing in his life. Because he had established a relationship with me. I helped him do his shopping. I helped him do things that gave him a sense of importance. It was small sometimes. It may have been take them to McDonald's, take them to his hospital appointments, take them to the VA. But I became an essential part of his life. And there was no need for me to disconnect that merely because my relationship strictly as a landlord. But I also saw the relative relationship as a friend, as a mentor, as a guide, as a friend. And so it's unique. It's unique. It's unique. And while there may be many out there that would suggest that you need to be about the business of just being a landlord, I would suggest that whatever business that you're about the business of, there's always an opportunity to be human and to help your fellow man or woman or child. And so I've taken that on, and like I said, I sleep well.
Wow.
So,
now,
but I thank you.
People get a chance to see why you're one of my mentors. That you know, that sense of that understanding that you are here to give, to serve. The highest calling is to serve, and you are certainly the epitome of that. And I want to thank you for taking a few minutes of your life and putting it on this camera so that I can broadcast this across this globe, so that it may inspire 1, 2 people, maybe 1, 200 people, maybe 1 or 2,000 people, who knows, maybe a couple of million people can get a chance to see this and be moved by what it is you're talking about and what you do and how you live your life. Thank you so much for
Well,
all
thank
you've
you.
done.
Thank you, and I thank you for what you're doing. And I tell an old friend of mine, Keith Smokey Johnson, all the time, and old not being in the chronological sense, but a number of years, that all new birth requires pain. And I think that we have to recognize that, and that there's always an opportunity, a rebirthing opportunity for all of us to help one another in spite of the pain that it may bring. And so I thank you, and I wish you well in continuing in the fine work that you are performing and capturing these situations, stories, whatever you want to call them. And I look forward to sitting with you in the future and maybe sharing another aspect of my life. So thank you so much.
I look forward to it. I will return, as they say.
All right. Okay.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, my brother, and
Peace.
all of you out there.
Hotep.
Thank you. Hotep.